Okay, I am going to go through my approach to adding one or two of these features to my text adventure. I think I'll do an item system and maybe some NPCs. And depending on how inspired I get, maybe the NPCs can pick up items. Maybe I'll have these two systems interact with each other somehow. Who knows? We'll have to see how things go. But basically, I just wanted to, now that you have all turned in your attempts at doing these, I wanted to show you how I approach the problem, which I'm sure will be different. There's a lot of different ways to go about implementing a system like this. Probably, I mean, I already know that many of you did it differently from each other, and I'm sure my way will be different as well. So let's dive in. Just remember that, so I'm going to do items first. Each room in your text adventure can store one or more items. Okay, so that's a change to the data structure. So the structure of a room needs to track the items that are in it. When a room's text is displayed, the user is shown the exits and the room's items. So the exits is already happening, but now the user needs to be told about the room's items. So in addition to this data structuring change, we need to change the logic of room display. And then we need to give the user some way to pick up an item and place it into their inventory. So a new action that they can take. They can not just exit a room through a chosen exit, but also pick up one or more of the items that are in the room. So each of these is going to be its own small challenge, but let's start with this one. Each room can store one or more items. Now to do that, what I like to do first, this is probably different from how you think about it because it's a little bit backwards, but I think this is what something that experienced programmers tend to do is to think about how they want to call a method even before that method exists. So what I'd like to be able to do is add something to the throne room, like maybe I'll add a crown to the throne room. There is no such thing as an item yet. I haven't worked on this problem. I have not written a single line of code to add items to rooms yet. But what I can do is write the code that I wish existed. Something like throne room dot add item. And then what? How do I add a crown? Maybe I say something like this. Add item crown. Maybe. Now it's red. It's telling me add item doesn't exist because that's true. I haven't written that method yet. But I'm not concerned by that. That's not the problem I'm working on just yet. I'm trying to decide what kind of code I'd want to write in order to add the item. I think maybe add item new item crown. Something like that. And what that would mean is that I'd need to implement this method, add item, which would need to be part of the room class. And I would need to create a new class called item with a constructor that takes in a name. That seems reasonably good. Maybe a description as well. This tarnished crown looks like it is as old as time itself. Whatever, something like that. So items have descriptions and then maybe just names. So names and descriptions. Maybe they'll have other things too, but that's the nice thing about having a class is I don't have to decide all of the things that constitute an item right off the bat. I just need to pick the things that make sense at the time, and I can always add things later, like a price, like maybe items can be bought and sold, or maybe the ability to be crafted, or maybe some kind of magic power. Like there's a lot of ways you can expand out your game, but you don't have to make all the decisions up front. So I think this is pretty reasonable to start with. That I'll say something like throne room, add item, and then I'll add, and then I'll construct the item there. I know also that I want to be able to add multiple items to a room, so I'll do that also, even though I have not yet implemented add item or the item class. I'm still writing the code that I wish I could write. So basically I'm writing the code that I want to get working. And then I'm going to go implement methods and classes in order to get it to work. So let's say a magic ring, and I'll say this magic. This ring glows from a strange power within. Something like that. And now I'll just let the red text guide me. So there's no item class. Let's go make one. I'll open up my source. I already have the room class in here. Makes sense for the item class to just be in the same directory as everything else for now. I don't know if the project's big enough to justify having subdirectories just yet, although some people like that. I'm just going to put everything at the top level right now. So we made a class item. That's easy enough. Now we need that. Again, we're just going to use the red text to guide us. Now we are going to add a constructor, because Java is telling us, hey, yeah, item exists, but you can't construct an item with two strings like this because there is no such constructor. We could type that constructor here, or those of you who like to save time, we can, we should be able to get a quick fix menu. If you mouse over it, go to create constructor, item string string, then it writes it for us. A quick time saver. Now, I can save that. Actually, I don't even need to save it, but you'll notice that, well, actually, I expected this red to go away. The constructor is undefined. Oh, I just need to save this file. Yeah. So it injected this code right here. We saved this file, and now that red text has gone away. Okay. Now, letting the red text guide us, room is missing an add item method. And once again, we can do the quick fix here, which is create that method. Now you have to know when you use a quick fix like this, or AI, or anything that generates code for you, you have to actually know the code that you want to write. And then the quick fix or the AI generation is just a time saver. If you don't know, then you might be tempted to click, I don't know, cast to throne room, which is like not at all what we want. So I'm going to do this add item to type room, and that opens up the room class, and it adds in this new method add item. Now I can save that now, and I think all the red text is going to go away. So I can now write here. I want to move this over here, and maybe I'll close up this for now. I can now write throne room.add item new item crown, and throne room add item new item magic ring. So I can start to author the story that I want. I can say that a throne room has a crown and a magic ring, and I can say what those things look like. So what's the next problem? Well, I can look at my requirements here and see that each room can store one or more magic items, kind of getting there, but we haven't done anything that displays the room's items to the users, so that's one thing we could work on. And we certainly haven't done anything related to picking them up. And honestly, if we really look close at this one, we haven't even finished that. So each room can store one or more items. All we're doing here is calling a method add item, passing in a new item, but in the room class, nothing actually happens here. This is just an empty method stub. So if we want to expand this data structure so that rooms can store items, we need something like this. Just like we had a list of adjacent rooms. probably want a list of stored items. Or perhaps we should just call it items. Because it's the room's list of items. I think it's pretty clear that it's the items in the room. I can't think of any other reason to name this variable differently. Now, depending on your game, you might have differences here. For example, if you want some of the items in a room to be hidden, like they're hard to see unless the player searches for them, then maybe you would have a list of hidden items. And then another list of, obvious items. We could do that. We could go in that direction. But I'm just going to implement this in the simplest possible way to start with, because a lot of those additional cool features you can always just add on later. So let's just make a list of items, call it items, and then in the add item, we just say items.add item. And then that's technically all we need to do to make sure that whenever we add an item to the throne room is actually now tracking that item. Which means we are done really with this requirement that the rooms store the items. It's happening in storage, in memory. This is now happening. And if we run the text adventure though, which I need to run the right one. Let's see. Yeah. Let's run this one. Oops. All right, maybe we have an error. Oh, yes. Okay, we do have an error. So we can't run it because this.items is null. So again, we're just letting the errors guide us. It tells us it's room.java line 34. So we can't run this line just yet because this list of items never got initialized. So let's fix that problem. Let's say this.items equals new list of items. Or new array list of items. Because list is an abstract type. There are various kinds of lists. Array list is a perfectly fine kind of list, so I'm just going to make this list be an array list. It's a subtle difference, or a subtle detail that really don't need to worry too much about. It would have also worked for me to just say that this list of items already is an array list, but it's good practice to use the most abstract kind of type. Just say that this is a list of items, doesn't matter what kind of list it is, and then only when you initialize it, you make the decision and say it's an array list. You could change this later and say linked list, which is another type of list in Java. We would have to import it, or already importing array list, because that's how we were storing our adjacent rooms. So no reason to differ and use a different kind of list for items than for rooms. So I'm just going to use the path of least resistance and choose array list. This is not the kind of decision I want you to worry too much about. I really just want you to worry about getting things implemented in a way that does work. The details of linked list versus array list is more about performance, like which one is slightly faster. And in a text adventure, it just doesn't matter. It's kind of irrelevant which one is slightly faster. So not going to worry about it in this domain. Okay, so now we're running again. So we're in the throne room. We're standing in an old dusty castle. We see the exits. We can choose an exit. But hey, there are items in this room. And our current game engine, the thing that generates text based on where you are, is not telling us what items there are. So that would be the next thing I would tackle. Is it prints out the exit and it lets us choose the exit. Choose an exit. I think I would like to print out the items as well. So let's stop the game. Let's copy the code that prints the exits. Let's say items. And notice that here this loop that we just copied down to here, this is looping over the exits. So it's I from 0 up to exit size. I would like this to be item size, right? In fact, maybe I could just change everything to items. And then just let the red text guide me. Items cannot be resolved. Then I could ask myself, well, why did exits work? Oh, because there's this variable right there. Forgot to copy that down, but I can do it now. I'm going to group this. I'm going to group all of these together because getting this exits variable and then printing it out and then looping over it is one thought. So just like you would organize things into paragraphs in written English, I'm going to do the same thing right here, and I'm going to match that pattern right here. So I'm going to say items current room dot get items. And now I'm realizing I don't have that method. So let's write that method. Let's go put it in rooms. Items is private. There's no way to get the items out of a room. We've only added a method to add items to a room, but makes perfect sense to say public list item get items as a way to get the items out of a room. So we now have a getter and a kind of setter for items in rooms. I'll save that. And now I'm actually puzzled. Why does it not? Ah, okay. It was giving me a red error, and I had to read it to see why. It says type mismatch cannot convert from list item to list room because get items returns a list of items, which makes total sense, but I accidentally left list room right here. It's a copy paste error. So let me change that to item. Yeah, and actually now we have no red text, so let's run it again and see if we at least get it to print out the 2 items that are in the room. Hey, look at that. Something's kind of working there. So you're standing in an old dusty castle, exits, door to the throne room. Just realized, why did it say door to the throne room if we're in the throne room? It's a small error in the writing, but I'll ignore that. And then items do print out, but it gives us the gobbledygook that happens when you just print out an object. So let's fix that. There are a few ways we can fix that. But in general, it's going to come down to how does an item get printed. So we have an object that's created from this class, and it's stored in the room, and then it gets printed out right here. And you'll notice that we get a line like this, 1:item gobbledygook, because we have I plus 1, and then a dot, and then it's just putting items.get I. Items, which is a list, dot get I. So it's getting the ith element out of a list of items. So what that means is this, which I have highlighted right here, is an object of type item. The reason I'm pointing that out is because I'm plussing a string and an item together. A string and an item. And anytime you plus an object onto a string, you get some nonsense like this, unless that class has a toString method. So if I do this, we should see something different print out here. Just adding this toString method makes items print out differently. Let me save that and rerun just to prove it to you. Yeah, see, look. Items, hi, I am an item. Now that's not super useful, but I'm just doing that to demonstrate that we didn't have to change this code here at all. It's still just getting plussed onto this string, which is getting plussed onto this number, but just having this method over here lets us control how items print out. it's probably time to address the fact that we haven't implemented this constructor here, because we would like items to print out in some way that makes sense based on their name and their description. So let's do it. Let's say that this is a name and this is a description. And let's go ahead and put in some kind of standard code. Let's say this dot name equals name, and this dot description equals description. And those, of course, need to be made into instance variables. So let's say private string name, private string description. Just so that we have instance variables to store the data that we care about. And then when someone constructs an item with that data, we store it into those variables. And now we have the ability to say that when someone prints out an item, maybe we just return the name. And that should be pretty cool. Let's try that. Yeah. Yeah, that totally worked. So we have items crown and magic ring. Now it's an open question, I think. Do we want to also display the description? Which might be kind of cool. Let's just see what it looks like. Yeah, well, that kind of worked. I need to add a space right there. Let's run that again. Yeah, so exits, door to throne room, items, crown, and then it gives the description. This tarnished crown looks like it has all its time itself, and magic ring, this ring glows from a strange power within. I kind of like the idea that when you pick up the item is when you would get to see what its description is. So maybe I'll take that out. Just have it be the name. I'm kind of making up the rules to this game as we go, but that's fine when you're just coding for fun. There's a personal artistic endeavor. You're allowed to do the design as you go. So for now, that's what I'll do. Is just print out the name of the item. Let me pop back over here just to make sure we're staying on track. So when a room's text is displayed, the user is shown the exits and the room's items. Okay, so technically we are done. Technically we're done with that. The rooms are storing the items are storing names and descriptions, and we're displaying the appropriate item's name when we're in that room. It might be a good idea just to exit and make sure that things work in another room. So we exited to the door to the throne room. Okay, I think I realize now why that's happening, because door to throne room is a room. So we exited the throne room, going to the door to the throne room, and now we can exit to the courtyard. And it says items : because there are no items. A little bit maybe a little bit hard to read when there are no items. So maybe we could say something like, if items.size equals 0, then system.out.println. Maybe we can say like no items here. Let's see how that looks. So I'll exit to the door. It says items, no items here. I like that. That's pretty nice. I also kind of like the idea that after the prompt, things are tabbed in a little bit. So items, we tab things in. I would like to tab in the exits. It's not strictly required, just I think it's a good idea to have nice typography when you can. It's easier to read, better for your user. Whoa. I accidentally made a unintended change here. So when I added that string in right there, it changed how it was concatenating on the rest of the data. I'm just going to put parens around the math so that it does the math first and then concatenates that onto the string. Otherwise, we ended up with that strange error from before, which I don't want to go into. So yeah, so we got exits, and then we have items. Now, how does the user choose? Because now you have two possibilities. You choose an exit or you choose an item. So this is maybe the trickiest part of the of this feature. We're giving players a new kind of thing they can do. So there's a few ways you might solve this, but I'm thinking the easiest thing will be just to enumerate the exits first and then the items so that each one has a unique number. And then instead of saying choose an exit, it can say choose an exit or item number. So this would be 1, this would be 2, this would be 3. We'll just start enumerating the items after whatever number of exits there are. So that part shouldn't be too hard, giving everything a unique number. Let's do that first and worry about how the user chooses later. Let's just make it possible for them to choose, and then we'll write the logic for them to actually make the choice. So in this loop, it loops up enumerating all the exits. And I would like this loop right here to start where the other one left off. So instead of starting back at 0, it would start at whatever this one ended on. So a few ways to do that. We could add a new variable like exit count and accumulate it during this loop. Or we could make the I index of the previous loop global, or not global, but public. We could lift it out of the for loop. Or we could use the fact that we know the size, we know how many exits there are using exit.size, and use that down here, which I think I like a little bit better. Yeah, let's do that. So when we say I plus 1, we can add on exits.size. Exits. Let's try that. Yeah, so that works. So door to throne room, and then crown, and then magic ring. Notice that they're all enumerating appropriately now, because this did say 1, but now we're adding on the number of exits we know exists, which in this case is 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. This was 2, but there's 1 exit. So this fixes everything and makes all the numbers unique. So that seems like the path of least resistance there. And now let's say choose an exit or item by typing its number, just to make it a little more clear. And now this of course won't work. If I say 3, what does it do actually? Yeah, I guess it just tries it. Yeah, it says invalid choice, try again, because it gets down into this else statement. So how do we fix that problem? The answer is I'm not sure yet. I need to kind of think about this. So I haven't actually read this code, so I'm going to read it now and make sure I understand it. So we do scanner next int to grab their choice. If the choice is greater than 0 and less than the exits.size. Oh, okay, yeah, perfect. If it's less than exits.size, we grab their exit choice. Okay, excellent. Now we're in the else. It's not necessarily invalid. Now they might be choosing an item. So same idea is, I guess we could just say choice equals choice minus exits dot size. I keep spelling exits wrong. Because if I typed in 3, which is the magic ring, and I subtract off the number of exits, that makes it 2, which is the second item. 2 means second item. So if I subtract off the number of exits from the choice, then it becomes becomes something close to an index into items. In fact, if I subtract off 1, now it becomes an index. So I could say current item equals items.get choice. So I wanted to match this logic here, where it just uses the number they entered as a get into a list. I'm just now using it as a get into a list of items instead of a list of rooms. I just had to do a little bit of, I think, not too complicated math in order to get that to work, because we're displaying the numbers to the user by adding on the number of exits in order to get the item numbers. So now, when they type in one of those numbers, we just subtract off the number of exits to get the item that they want. -1 because arrays start at 0. And then we have the ability to get the current item, which I guess let's just define right here. Yeah, so now we have the current item. What do we do? Well, you know I like to print things out. So let's say system.out.println. And how about you picked up an item? In fact, let's say what item they picked up. Let's print out what item they picked up. Current item. And the question is, when do we say invalid choice, try again? Because it's not this whole else branch. Some of this is good. Some of it is bad. We need to branch between this part where they pick up an item and this part where they did something wrong. And I think it really comes down to, can this choice be used to get something out of items? So we say if, I'm going to basically mirror this logic right here, but for items. So if choice is less than items.size, then we will let them get a current item out of the items list and say that she picked it up. Otherwise, let's say that it was an invalid choice and they should try again. Now, I know that that doesn't put it in the player's inventory yet. Haven't gotten that far. Let's just see if, let's see if typing number 2, ooh, I was hoping it would do something other than that. So, let's see. I think 2 should have been the crown, but index -1 out of bounds for length 2. Kind of seems like we don't need to subtract off this number. Did I make a mistake in my logic there? So if they type in 2, which I did, and then we subtract off the number of exits, which is 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. Shouldn't we have to subtract off 1 more? Choice is 2. 2 minus exits.size, which is 1. All right. Well, those of you watching, maybe you know exactly what the problem is, but I'm clearly making some kind of mistake here and I don't understand. So let me do what I usually do when I don't understand something, which is try to print out everything So system.out.print line. Let's just print out choice and get to the bottom of this real quick by just rerunning this several times. Why it worked that time? Wait. Okay, hold on. What is going on? Okay, I'm very confused. All right, we're gonna stop this. And we're gonna run it from scratch. If I type in 2, it says you picked up item crown. Oh, okay, yeah. So I had this here, which I thought was correct. Apparently it is not. So let's stop and restart. Now if I type in 2, it doesn't work. And presumably if I type in 3, it also doesn't work. Yeah, if I type in 3, it thinks I picked up the crown. So I am off by 1 here. But why is that? Still, for some reason, I'm just a little bit puzzled why did I think it was one thing and not the other. So I'm gonna put in what I thought was correct because I want to understand why I'm wrong. So when I type in 2, I'm not gonna hit enter yet. I'm just gonna say what I think should happen. Oh, because it's already doing a scanner next int -1 up here. Okay. The -1 has already been accounted for. I didn't read this line carefully enough until just now. So I don't need to subtract off another one. It's already been turned into a valid index by minusing 1. So now later on, all we have to do is subtract off the number of exits, and then it becomes an index into the list of items. Okay, done. Mystery is solved. By the way, that was not orchestrated. I did legitimately get confused there, and I did do what I would legitimately do if I was coding for myself or on a team or, you know, in any context, which is if there's a mystery and you don't understand why something is happening, you should figure out why. Like, those are, you know, always going to be learning opportunities, and you just want to minimize the number of things about your code that you're misunderstanding, because that's where bugs come from. So if your code ever does something weird, even if it's working, you should be trying to understand it. Bugs are not the only thing that you should drill into and try to kind of understand. Anything where your code is behaving in a way you don't expect is something you should try to understand. Bugs just force you to do it because you can't move on if you have bugs. Working code that works in ways that you don't understand requires some discipline. And so that's what I was doing there, was, you know, using my discipline to figure out why this line was correct instead of this line. I was legitimately puzzled just because I had overlooked this earlier. So now I understand. Okay. So I think it's working. I think we can move on. I think we're ready to, let me just test it one more time. So let's say, can I pick up the magic ring? Yes, picked up an item, magic ring. I think I'm going to print out another one of these because it's like just a little bit hard. So after you choose, I think I'm going to print that. So let's say 2, crown. Yeah, because now it's like a little bit easier to see. Maybe I'll do that right before the choice. They probably both look pretty good. I just want to be able to see the sections of the story. So it's like, here's your current location, here's a description of the location, choose an exit, and then what the result is. That's pretty good. Maybe it would look even better if we tabbed in the result. Yeah. So choose an exit by typing its number. I choose 2. and then it says picked up an item crown. Cool. Now, it does reprint the throne room at that point, which I guess is fine. I mean, maybe we could change that in a moment, but I can't really think of something better. The main problem right now is that it's just lying. You didn't really pick up the item. In fact, it's still sitting there in the room getting printed out. So we need to take it out of the room and put it into the player's inventory. And both of those are things we don't have the ability to do yet. So rooms have the ability to have items added to them, and that there's the ability to take an item out of a room, but I think we need a public void remove item. And I believe from a list we can just say remove. Oh, but I think we have to know where the item is. No. Yeah, there's a remove that takes an object, so that should work. So we'll just say remove item. And that shouldn't be hard to do. Yeah, we should be able to say current room dot remove item current item. Let me do that right before the printout, even though it doesn't technically matter. I just feel like the print out should be true, and it's only true right after this line. So we get their choice, we remove it from the room, and then we say we picked up an item. And that, it's actually nice that it's gonna now cycle back and print out the same room again, because now we can check that the item list is now been updated. So let's see, this is a moment of truth here. If I type in 2 and press enter, it should reprint all of this, but now the crown should not be in the list of items. Yay, awesome. That was awesome. Yeah, so now we are still standing in the throne room, same exits, but now one less item. And it's updated the number, of course, because it re-enumerated them in order to print all of this, so that worked just fine. In fact, we should be able to do this. Pick up item number 2 again, which now is the magic ring. And yeah, now it reprints it and it says no items here. So that's actually working really well. We're able to deplete rooms of their items, but then they go into nothingness. This total ether, right? We get it. The item exists here in memory. We remove it from the room. We print something out, and then we leave this if statement, and then this item is no longer accessible anymore. It's gone. It gets garbage collected by Java's garbage collector, and it's gone. It just goes poof. The crowns and magic rings no longer exist. If we want them to continue to be part of the game, we have to put them somewhere else. We can shuffle that data around somewhere. And so this is where it would be nice to have an inventory. And it's an open question of where's the best place to have an inventory. It'll basically be another list of items, but stored somewhere else. Putting it in main text adventure is one option. We could store the data about the player's state here. But there's other things we might want for players, like hit points or mana or their level or their XP. There's lots of things that you've probably seen in other games. Players, the data structure of a player can get kind of complicated. So although I could stick it inside of text adventure, maybe it's good to make a class for player just so that we can add additional things to the player later. On the other hand, it would be simplest to just put it in text adventure and then move it to a player class later. So I'm kind of on the fence. I'm thinking of two different ways of implementing this. They're both fine. They just have pros and cons. And unfortunately, that's usually the case when you're making a decision in software engineering, is nothing's ever clear-cut right or wrong. How about I'll do it both ways? I'll do it both ways. If I do it both ways, I don't know if I'm gonna have time to get to the NPC system, but I think that's okay. I want to take you through my like design process for basically adding a new feature onto an existing code base, and I think it's more useful for you to see me do that in a slow, methodical way with one than to just, try to add as many features as I can. And who knows, maybe adding the player class with the inventory gets us actually slightly closer to having non-player characters, because having a player class is something we could probably reuse for other characters in the game, not just the main character. Which actually another good reason not to put it into text adventure. It's a good reason for it to be its own class. So I'm going to do it in the simplest possible way, which is put it in text adventure. Then I'm going to refactor it into a player class. Doing it that way actually has some nice benefits, is that I get to implement it in the simplest possible way, make sure it works, and then turn it into a form that's easier to add new features onto. And then you get to see both. So neither one of these is right or wrong. In fact, I think I'm getting the best of both worlds by doing both, because it'll still end up the way that I think is best, but I get to pass through a state where the code is very simple, and I get to think through just the feature of players picking up items and placing it into their inventories without having to think of other things like player classes and other complexity. So we'll do both. I'm going to say player stuff, and I'm going to say to do, move this to player.java. It's not the final destination for this code. It's just a temporary place. And I'm just using it to make implementing this feature simpler for myself. So I'll say list of items, inventory equals new array list of item. And then we have to import that. That should be a quick fix. Yes. Yep. Okay. Imported it right there. Okay, so we now have a list of items. That's the minimum thing that we need, is the ability to print out the items in our inventory. Or the ability to track the items in our inventory. We don't technically need a player class to do that. We just need a list. And then when we take it out of the rooms list, this one over here, we need to put it into this list over here. So it stops being in the room, it starts being in our inventory, and we need to do those things together. So right when we remove the item, we want to say inventory.add item. These two lines. Removing it from one place, adding it to the other, they go together. Now, we could test that. It wouldn't be very satisfying, though, but we could at least make sure that we don't get any errors. So let's pick up the crown. Yeah, that worked. Let's pick up the magic ring. Okay, that worked. But there's no evidence that it's in our inventory. So I think every time, this is just the easiest thing, is every time we walk into a room, maybe it makes sense to print out the stuff that's in our inventory. Or we could have some actions that you trigger by typing in a letter. Like maybe I for inventory, and that prints out everything in your inventory. That would be kind of a nice way to do it as well. In the interest of doing the minimum, right before it prints out the current location, let's have it print out your player status. And for now, I think just gonna print out all the items in in your inventory for your player status. So I'm going to loop over inventory, I from 0 up to inventory size. And then we are going to print out, do I want to print out the numbers in your inventory? Possibly, because in a moment we might want people to be able to use these items. So yeah, I'll keep the I plus 1 on there. And we will say inventory.getI. So I basically just stole that for loop that was printing out all the items in the room, and I just made some small changes to have it print out the items in the inventory. And that, I think that should be enough. Let's see. Player status, nothing. Okay, I guess we should probably... Let's steal this logic. And say if inventory size 0, carrying no items. Yeah, so player status, carrying no items, current location, throne room, you're standing in an old dusty castle. Maybe we could tab this in, just slightly easier to read. Yeah. Player status, carrying no items, current location, throne room, you're standing in an old dusty castle, exit, store to throne room, items. So all of these are things that all of this is like the current state, and all of these are actions you can take. Let's see what happens when we pick up a crown. Yep. Now player status, crown. Player status, crown. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. Let's say player inventory status. Let's pick up a crown. Yeah, so player inventory status, crown. Current location, throne room, standing in an old dusty castle, exits, etc. Okay, so that's kind of nice. Now we can pick up the magic ring, player inventory status, etc. And now it should follow us, right? If we exit to the door to the throne room, nothing changes about our inventory, so we should still have it. So I'm going to exit. Yeah, and now it says player inventory status. I still have those 2 items I picked up. I am now at the door to the throne room. There's no description on that one. I think I just put ... I have new exits. I can exit to the courtyard. And I'm still carrying the crown and magic ring. They stay with me because I'm storing them in this list that's not getting changed. So technically we are done. A player can pick up an item and place it into their inventory. It is no longer in the room after this. So this feature exists. But something makes me want to add just like a bonus feature, a bonus requirement, which is the ability to drop an item. It'd just be nice to be able to take an item from one room and move it to somewhere else. It seems useful. Seems like a good way to like start, cobbling together a more interesting text adventure system. So the code's not too hard. We just need to reverse this kind of thing. Instead of removing it from the room and adding it to the inventory, we would remove it from the inventory and add it to the room. The user interface, though, is a little bit of a challenge. We need to decide what do you do? Do we use the same thing? Like choose an item, exit or item by typing in its number, and we enumerate the inventory, then the exits, then the items you can pick up? That certainly seems the easiest. But it might be more intuitive if the player typed in like maybe the action they wanted, like pick up, and then it enumerated the things they could pick up. Or if they typed in drop, then it would enumerate the items they could drop. That's probably better, but it requires more thought and requires more changes to the code. and we already have one to-do item that we haven't done yet. So I think what I'm going to do is just... this will be a little bit tricky, but we'll do the same trick where we're going to enumerate everything uniquely. So all of the things in your inventory, the exits and the items, we're going to make sure they have unique numbers so that whatever you type in is kind of clear. If you're typing in a thing that you have, then for now that just means drop it. Now later on we'll have to decide what we want to do. Maybe we say they type in 1 and then an additional question comes up like, do you want to drop or use this item or craft it or give it to the NPC? There's lots of things you might want to do with an item. But for now, since all we know we want to do is drop, I'll just have it automatically drop if you type in the item. Which is going to be a little bit tricky, like I said. So when we get down to here and we're printing out the exits, I guess we want to do the same trick as before, where we add on inventory.size. And then when we print out the items, we want to add on inventory size and exit size, which is starting to feel gross, starting to feel like that's getting a little bit complicated. And that's at least one thing I want you to see about software engineering is the more features you add, the more murkiness and complexity, the more weird things you have to do in your code. Eventually it's going to call for some kind of refactoring to kind of simplify some of this. But for now, maybe it's manageable. There's only 3 things. Let's see if that works. Yeah, so carrying no items, exits, and items is all working. Now if I pick up one, yeah. Now it says crown, throne room, and items. And it starts at 1, then it's 2, then it's 3. A little confusing, maybe. Maybe if you haven't played this game, then you're like, exits, why does it say 2 right here? So some improvements possible for the UI for sure. But just in terms of getting it to work, I think it's getting there. When they type in the number though, this is where things are going to break. Like if I type in 1, I think it's going to still exit to the throne room. Yeah, it exited to the door to the throne room. So let's fix that down here. They do the choice. Is this still on the fence if this is the best way to do it, but sometimes it's best to just finish out the thought and then can improve it later. So okay, so the type in the choice, the first thing we want to do is see if there's if it can be used as an inventory index. So that's what we'll do first. We'll say if the choice is less than 0, or sorry, greater than or equal to 0, and it's less than the inventory dot size, then we would say item, I'm changing a bunch of code here. I'm at least going to comment it out because I need some of that code later. So let me just keep that as a reference. Then make this fairly deep change, which is inventory. So we'll check if it can be used as an inventory index. If so, we'll say item current item equals inventory.getChoice. Then we, as I mentioned earlier, do the reverse of this logic, which is inventory.removeItem, and then current room.add current item. Actually, let's just remove. And this is add item, because inventory is a list, and remove is a method on lists. Add item is a method on rooms. So we basically do the reverse of these two things. Now, let's try an else if. Because if it's not an item that they're dropping, then it is an exit they're taking. So we want to say, I guess we could just drop into this else. Yeah, we could drop into the else, and we can say that choice equals choice minus inventory size, because we weren't able to use it as an index into the inventory, which means it must be larger than the inventory size. So therefore, they're trying to take an exit. So let's take off the inventory size. So now choice can be used as an index into the exit that they want. And we'll say if choice is less than exits.size. Then we will let them take the exit, which is this code up here that I commented out. And now that I have that, I can delete it. I basically took that whole if statement and rewrote it right here. And then else, one more else, is where we do this bit down here. Get rid of this white space. And does that work? It's getting pretty tricky. But yeah, so if they have enter a number bigger than their inventory, we subtract off the inventory size. Then we check, okay, well, is that smaller than the exits? Number of exits? If so, go ahead and grab the next exit and don't do anything else. Or else, meaning it's bigger than the number of exits, then we subtract off the number of exits so that choice can now be used as an index into the items in the room. And we check, okay, one last check to make sure, there's enough items for that choice to make sense. If they entered a gigantic number, they'll end up here, invalid choice. But if they entered a number that's within the right range, then now we get that item out of the room, remove it from the room, add it to the inventory, all the same logic as before. So yeah, in order to add dropping an item, we had to make what happens down here a lot more complicated, which is not great. You can kind of imagine that the more things you want to add for a user to do, the trickier it's going to be to get some of this logic right, and the greater the chances of bugs. But let's see what happens. See if it works. It's probably a bug. Who knows? Carrying no items in the throne room. Door to the throne room. Okay, let's try picking up the crown. Hey, all right. Picked up the crown. We're still in the throne room. We can still exit, and we have a magic ring. Let's drop the crown. Let's see if that works. Oh, hey, that worked. That worked, actually. Yeah. So now we're carrying no items, and we dropped the crown. And in fact, we ended up reversing the order because it was crown, then magic ring. We picked up one and then dropped it. Now it's magic ring, then crown. So that's awesome. All right, I'm just curious if we can pick up the magic ring, move somewhere else. So I'm gonna exit. Let's go all the way to the courtyard. Yeah, so I'm still carrying a magic ring. Now I'm in the courtyard. I could exit to the drawbridge, but let's see if I can drop the magic ring. Yes, totally worked. Yeah. So now we're carrying no items. We're still in the courtyard. We still exit to the drawbridge, but now there's a magic ring here. We should be able to go, I guess, go back. If we could ever get back to the See, I think this makes a big circle. So if I exit to the moat, then maybe exit to the mountain, then maybe exit. Oh, no, maybe not. Can I exit to the forest? Exit to the lake. Exit to the mountain. Okay, I guess my game is set up poorly. There's no way for me to get back to see that my items are still there, but they should be. There's no reason that they wouldn't stay in the rooms. So that's pretty cool. So I'm just going to tidy up, do this last bit by moving this over to a player.java. Okay. The first thing I will do, of course, is make a new class called player. And I'll close up some of my other files so that I can see player alongside text adventure. And I'm going to delete this comment since that's what I'm doing right now. I'll take this and move it over here. Save that. And then, of course, everything breaks over in text adventure because this inventory no longer exists. That's okay. But let's go ahead and make a, so let's make this private, and let's make a method to return it. Public list item get inventory. Return inventory. And then over here, just like we set up the adventure and our scanner and all our like global stuff for running the game, let's also make a player and call it main character. I'll just say new player. So doing that, creating a new player, is going to also create a new inventory, since that's a instance variable inside of the player class. So we're still creating an inventory. And now we need to figure out how to get this variable to be back in scope. And probably the best way to do it is just to say list item inventory equals player.getInventory. Main character get inventory. Yep. And then, yeah, that does it. So that everything should be exactly the same now. It's the exact same logic. It's just a few more lines of code and an extra class. So actually the code got longer after this refactoring. So you might ask, well, why did we do it in the first place? Why not just leave it here? It was fairly simple, just one line of code. Now it's all this. And as I alluded to earlier, it's because this lets us, this gives us a place to add additional features if we want players to have something more than just an inventory. Hit points, mana, experience points, armor, equipped rings, stuff like that. It logically makes sense that that should all go inside of its own file, rather than continuing to clutter up stuff over here the more and more stuff we add. So we're kind of future-proofing the project by creating a player class, even though the only thing about a player right now is their inventory. That's one reason. The other is that if we wanted an NPC system, we now have the ability to create players. We don't just have to use that for main characters. We could actually use that for the NPC system as well. So I won't do this whole feature, but I think we can do at least these first two fairly quickly now that we have a player class. So each room can store one or more NPCs. When a room's text is displayed, the user is shown the exits and the room's NPCs. Okay. Well, that shouldn't be too bad. So let's open up room. And we're just going to retrace our steps. Just like we added a list of items, let's add a list of player. And I'll call it NPCs. Just like we have this add item, remove item, and get items, let's do the same exact ones, but just for players. So say add player. Let's say player. Change this here as well. Change this here as well. And change this. And this. And this. Okay. Did I get it? Nope. A couple more. NPCs. And NPCs. And NPCs. Okay. There we go. So now we have the 3 matching methods for players, which means we can now go back to wherever we're setting up our game. And just like we added 2 items to the throne room, let's add a player to, how about the courtyard? So courtyard dot add player. And we say new player. And now, as I'm writing this, I'm realizing kind of lame that we can't give this person a name. He's in the courtyard. Let's call him the jester. The court jester. But we don't have a constructor that takes a name. So let's just patch player and add that in. Add a new. Actually, let's use the quick fix to add the constructor. And then when this constructor is called, let's say this dot name equals, let's actually call this parameter name. And now over here it's broken because this main character doesn't have a name. Now, might be pretty cool to have a phase of the game where the player gets to, or the user gets to create their character and choose a name. But for now, let's just say main player, or main character, something like that. A little bit of a lame name, but whatever. Okay, so now, just like before, we've done this part. Each room can store 1 or more NPCs. It's just there's no way for the player to know that they're there. Oh, and also we made the same mistake where it says we cannot add because this .npcs is null, so we have to initialize this .npcs. Okay, let's see if it runs now. Oh, yep. Let's try to see if it runs now. Okay. So we could go to the courtyard, and we're in the courtyard, which has no items, but theoretically, there's a player here, like an NPC. The jester is in the courtyard. It's in memory, it's just not getting displayed to the user. We added it right here. It's part of the castle setup. So you could probably imagine what we're going to do next. But right here, after displaying the items, how about we display the NPCs? Just pattern matching. So get the list of players, print out NPCs. If there are no players, say no NPCs here. When we start looping, we'll loop over players. We can basically give each one a unique number by adding on inventory size, exit size, and item size. But then we'll print out the player name right there. Okay, let's see if that does anything. Yeah. So in the throne room, we have our usual items, usual door, and no NPCs. Let's exit to the door to the throne room. No items, no NPCs. Let's exit to the courtyard. Yeah, now we see player gobbledygook. Just object ID. So just ask yourself, do you remember from earlier in this video, how do we get an object to print out in a nice way? We will add to that class a toString method and return the string that we'd like to print out, which in this case be this.name. And so if we got that right, then it should print out Jester right there once we go to the courtyard. Yep. Yeah, so now we're in the courtyard, exit Strawbridge, no items, but there is a Jester. Now, can we talk to the Jester? No, I don't think that's gonna work because we haven't changed the choice logic here to allow that to happen. And this choice logic is already getting kind of gross. Once the third nested if statement gets added to code, I start to consider it too complicated. So I could certainly continue to make the code worse by adding another nested if statement just to get talking to NPCs to work. But I've kind of reached my limit of how gross I'm willing to let the code become. So if I were to add this next part, like player can talk to NPCs, or maybe you can give items to an NPC, I would redesign this part first so that it doesn't get more and more complicated and more annoying every time I add a new thing a player wants to do. This often will happen. It's like when depending on how your code is structured, there are some parts that are really easy to add stuff to. Like adding an item and players to part of the castle is super easy. It's just like one line. We could add easily hundreds of items and hundreds of players all throughout our game, and it really wouldn't be that bad. It's not like the logic is getting super, super complicated. But the moment we want to add a new kind of thing a player can do, like talking to an NPC, this part of the code down here, handling the choice, that gets annoying to deal with. So some parts of the code are kind of welcoming of change, and other parts of the code are like resistant to the change. And if you can identify parts of the code that are resistant to change and keep annoying you, keep becoming sources of bugs every time you add a new kind of feature, then it tells you the part that you need to rewrite to make change easier. So I won't do that in this video. I'll just point out that this part of the code, we've seen it evolve twice throughout this video, and here we are poised to add yet another if statement to allow talking to NPCs. It's pretty easy to identify that this is the part of code that's going to be the bottleneck for change. And so therefore, rewriting it can potentially make change easier. But I'll put that as a kind of an optional thought experiment to you, is how would you rewrite this code so that it's easy to add new kinds of things that a player can interact with? Could you build an interaction system that can be extended in much the same way that our rooms items and player systems are easy to extend. It's easy to add rooms, connect them to each other, add items and players. That part is well designed. The interaction system of the player needs some work. It's not well designed yet. It works, it's just hard to change. So that's my optional thought experiment to you. How would you change these lines of code, this 20 lines of code, into something that scales better, is more accepting and welcoming of change? All right, that's how I'll end the video. See you next time.